Welcome back to the AI Breakdown. Today, we are talking about an AI backlash that killed a startup and why it's likely not the only casualty in the wars to come. Now, over the last couple days, we have had a lot of context to talk about AI backlash. Last week, OpenAI shared more information about something called GPT-Bot. GPT-Bot is OpenAI's web crawler that goes around collecting data from the open web and scraping it to be used in the training of future AI models. Think GPT-5 and beyond. Now, importantly, as part of the announcement, OpenAI also shared how to disallow the GPT-Bot. In other words, how to make it so that GPT-Bot is not able to access and scrape the data from one's website. In the first couple days after the announcement, sites, as Ars Technica put it, scrambled to block the web crawler. Ars Technica writes, while wildly successful from a tech point of view, ChatGPT has also been controversial by how it scraped copyrighted data without permission and concentrated that value into a commercial product that circumvents a typical online publication model. OpenAI has been accused of and sued for plagiarism along these lines. In the hours following the release of the instructions on how to block GPT-Bot, publications including The Verge, Substack writer Casey Newton, and others had said that they would immediately block GPT-Bot. At the same time, Ars points out that it's not necessarily a totally cut and dry decision. They write, for large website operators, the choice to block large language model crawlers isn't as easy as it may seem. Making some LLMs blind to certain website data will leave gaps of knowledge that could serve some sites very well, but it may also hurt others. For example, blocking content from future AI models could decrease a site's or brand's cultural footprint if AI chatbots become a primary user interface for the future. That, however, has not stopped the biggest publication so far from announcing that it would block GPT-Bot and indeed AI models in general. As first reported by Adweek, the New York Times has updated its terms of service to prohibit content that includes text, photographs, images, audio and video clips, quote-unquote look and feel, metadata, or compilations from being used in any AI training. The terms specify that automated tools like the GPT-Bot crawler cannot be used to access its content. However, as The Verge pointed out, the NYT doesn't yet seem to have appeared to make any changes to the robots.txt file that would be the way that it actually actively blocked GPT-Bot itself. Now, another big backlash story that came up last week came when an author discovered that AI-generated books were being sold under her name on Amazon. When one of her fans discovered fake titles under her name, author Jane Friedman, who writes about working in the writing and publishing industry, discovered that there were a number of titles similar to the topics that she normally writes about and printed under her name, but which were definitely not her words. Friedman said, when I started looking at these books, looking at the opening pages, looking at the bio, it was just obvious to me that it had been mostly, if not entirely, AI generated. I have so much content available online for free because I've been blogging forever, so it wouldn't be hard to get an AI to mimic me. Now, initially, Friedman reported that Amazon were not particularly helpful and didn't immediately take the titles down. However, after her consternation and story went viral, the books disappeared, and Amazon said that the books sold under her name were prohibited and the type of imitation that it represented were prohibited by their terms. A spokesperson said, we have clear content guidelines governing which books can be listed for sale and promptly investigate any book when a concern is raised. Now, as this story was picking up, another story about AI and authors was also starting to get traction. Novelist Hari Kunzru tweeted on August 7th, this company Prosecraft appears to have stolen a lot of books, trained an AI, and are now offering a service based on the data. The site in question, Prosecraft.io, had been created in 2017 and was actually just a side project. It came out of founder Benji Smith's tendency to count words and phrases in books that he liked and try to determine things like how many adverbs there were. The Prosecraft site took that to a new level, analyzing lots and lots of different works compared to one another to create scores for things like vividness. However, authors like Hari never gave their permission for their books to be used in that way. And so when they discovered Prosecraft, there was an almighty uproar. Numerous authors started posting about how people could check to see if their works had been included in Prosecraft. Benjamin BLM tweeted, oh hi, didn't see you there. Are you upset about Prosecraft? Are you tired of AI companies taking everything you've ever made and put online? Even books you haven't put online and feeding it to a meat grinder? Sign the Authors Guild open letter. Eventually, the uproar reached such a fever pitch that Benji Smith took down the website entirely. He wrote, today I'm taking down the Prosecraft.io website, which had been previously dedicated to the linguistic analysis of literature, including more than 25,000 books by thousands of different authors. Benji continues, I originally started working on this project more than 10 years ago when I began writing a memoir about a difficult time in my life. It was my first book and I didn't know how many words I should write. I had heard that real books should be about 100,000 words. I searched the internet for guidance, but I didn't find much. So I pulled a few paperbacks off my own shelves, books by authors I admired, and counted by hand how many words were on the first few pages. Then I counted the total number of pages and multiplied the two numbers to get an estimate. I kept a little spreadsheet and it was precious to me. Precious guidance from authors whose books I adored when I was struggling to tell my own story. Benji basically then says that led him to create his own company to make tools for authors and started trying to expand the works that he was analyzing. Benji said, I researched copyright laws, mindful of not wanting to hurt or offend the community of authors that I cared so much about. Since I was only publishing summary statistics and small snippets from the text of those books, I believed I was honoring the spirit of the fair use doctrine, which doesn't require the consent of the original author. Since I never shared the text that I acquired by crawling the internet, I believed that I was in compliance with the relevant laws. And now this is the part where it gets really interesting. And Benji starts to look a little bit less like a big tech villain that he's been painted out to be, and a little bit more like a guy whose passion project got caught up in larger tides of history. He writes, I launched the Prosecraft website in the summer of 2017, and I started showing it off to authors at writers' conferences. The response was universally positive. I've spent thousands of hours working on this project, cleaning up and annotating text, organizing and tweaking things. A small handful of authors have even reached out to me asking to have their books added to the website. I was grateful for their enthusiasm. But in the meantime, AI became a thing, and the arrival of AI on the scene had been tainted by early use cases that allow anyone to create zero-effort impersonations of artists, cutting those creators out of their own creative process. That's not something I ever wanted to participate in. Today, the community of authors has spoken out, and I'm listening. I care about you, and I hear your objections. Your feelings are legitimate, and I hope you'll accept my sincerest apologies. In the future, I would love to rebuild this library with the consent of authors and publishers. I truly believe these tools are useful for creative people. But now is not the right time, I understand, and I'm sorry. And so to be clear, Prosecraft was not a A16Z-backed startup or something like that, nor was the associated company Shakespeare, the desktop app that plugged into it. This is a two-person side project. And I think that's relevant to keep in mind as you read the visceral responses from authors once it was shut down. Ewan Morrison writes, a victory for authors. A website that used AI to analyze thousands of novels without authors' consent has been shut down by protesting authors. Warning to big tech, no, you cannot use our books to grow your AI. Don't even try it. Gabino Iglesias writes, Prosecraft is no more. Why? Because writers got pissed. Because we won't take shit and let our work be fed into machines. The fight is just starting, but we're in this for the long haul. Now, of course, while as tempting and emotionally fulfilling as it might be to view this as the Davids of the authors fighting the Goliaths of big tech, Kate Nibbs at Wired kinda has the right of it when she writes, why the great AI backlash came for a tiny startup you've probably never heard of. Jane Friedman, the author who we were just discussing about, whose works were copied on Amazon, called the piece the most thoughtful coverage she's seen yet, and says experts in copyright and fair use are consulted and quoted thankfully. One of the things that the Wired piece points out is that it was hardly as cut and dry as some of these authors made it seem. Quote, publishing industry analyst Thad McElroy doesn't approve of data scraping, but he sees the backlash against Prosecraft as majorly misguided. His term? Shrieking hysteria. And some copyright experts have watched the furor with their jaws near the ground. While the argument against piracy is simple to follow, they are skeptical that Prosecraft could have been taken to court successfully. Matthew Sagg, a law professor at Emory University, thinks Smith could have mounted a successful defense of his project by invoking fair use. Sagg, along with several other experts I spoke with, pointed to Google Books and Hathi Trust cases as precedent, two examples of the courts ruling in favor of projects that uploaded snippets of books online without obtaining the copyright holder's permission, determining that they constituted fair use. Sagg said, I think that the reasons that people are upset really don't have anything to do with this poor guy. I think it has to do with everything else going on. TechDirt's Mike Masnick wrote something similar. He wrote a post, the fear of AI just killed a very useful tool. He points to one of the tweets that went viral around this, from Zach Rosenberg, who wrote, how dare you, Benji? I demand you take my book off your site immediately. I do not consent to this and never did, and I know my publisher never would. Masnick writes, I'm still perplexed at what the complaint is here. You don't need to consent to someone putting up statistics about their analysis of your book. But Zach's tweet went viral with a bunch of folks ready to blow up at anything that smacks of tech bro AI, and lots of authors started yelling at Smith. Masnick then points out, the Gizmodo article has a ridiculously wrong fair use analysis, saying fair use does not by any stretch of the imagination allow you to use an author's entire copyrighted work without permission as part of a data trading program that feeds into your own AI algorithm. Except ... it almost certainly does. Again, we've gone through this with the Google Books scanning case, and the court said that you absolutely can do that because it's transformative. Masnick continues, it seems that what really tripped people up here was the AI part of it, and the fear that this was just another VC-funded tech bro exercise of building something to get rich by using the works of creatives. Except none of that is accurate. Masnick concludes, I find all of this really unfortunate. Smith built something really cool, really amazing that does not in any way infringe on anyone's rights. I get the knee-jerk reaction from some authors who fear that this was some obnoxious project, But couldn't they have taken 10 minutes to look at the details of what it was they were killing? I know we live in an outrage era where the immediate reaction is to turn the outrage meter up to 11. I'm certainly guilty of that at times myself. But this whole incident is just sad. It was an overreaction from the start, destroying what had been a clear labor of love and a useful project through misleading and misguided attacks from authors. Now, there are also a number of other folks who sort of had this similar analysis, getting into the details of fair use, but ultimately it probably doesn't matter so much. Ultimately, what this is a story about is not really fair use and whether Prosecraft was in the right, but instead about a much larger cultural and economic battle that is not just brewing, but frankly here and out in the open right now. I think interestingly, even the appeal to precedent in cases like Google Books is not going to satisfy people who view AI as a fundamental threat to what they do and what they make their living from. The concern is completely understandable. The fear of change is for many very legitimate. But ultimately, these technologies are here and they're not just going to be screamed away. It seems to me that a far more effective approach ultimately would be to engage with some semblance of openness and nuance. Not because one has to compromise their core principles, but because, frankly, the technology is a genie that's not being put back in a bottle. That inevitably the legal system will deal with nuance even if people don't want it to. And that having a positive hand in shaping how all that plays out is probably going to be better ultimately than being locked in a perpetual battle. But then again, it's very easy for me to say this from the sidelines. All I know ultimately is that we're going to have a lot more battles like this. So being able to categorize and understand, to rank order them even, in terms of their importance, feels like it will be a very essential skill. And it's hard for me to see how killing Prosecraft specifically, whose creator is A, just a guy, and B, so clearly sympathetic to the movement that aligned against him, is really a big win. Anyways, guys, that is going to do it for today's AI Breakdown. This is an important and contentious one, so let me know what you think in the comments. Come join us on the AI Breakdown Discord, which you can find at bit.ly/AI Breakdown. And until next time, peace.